Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday. It's 12:30. It is Lancat Home Games. It's a very special edition today. Of course, every edition with Will Robbins is of course very special. But it is the Lancat Home Games birthday today. 1 year on from our seminal Lancat Home Games a year ago today. We will go live. We won't leave them hanging and say hello to Will. And what in God's name are you wearing? Sunshine.
I mean, I thought I'd drape myself in our beautiful Union flag, Union Jack, to demonstrate my superior loyalty to the crown compared to other sort of media outlets. So, where's your flag, Steve?
I find it quite offensive that you would think I would lower myself to such a cheap and lousy, easy laugh, and I actually definitely didn't go to the trouble of doing anything rubbish to try and provoke people on the live chat. But yeah, it's a right old laugh. Look at us, what a bunch of cheeky chappies. Yep, thanks. There's loads of people on live today, which is absolutely lovely. We'll do the standard Lancat housekeeping, and then we'll get fired right into our conversation. The live chat's open if you want to have your usual Lancat nonsense on the live chat, then that's absolutely fine. Lancat Mike, Ginger Spice has let herself go. Yeah, I didn't need that mental image, but there we go. So you can fire any questions towards Will or myself, and I'll try and sweep them up in the live chat. You can also use the Ask a Question link down at the bottom, kind of right-hand side, depending on whether I'm on your left or right, but it's just down the bottom of your screen. And you can ask a question to us, and I will pick them up. If you are watching this live, the full archive is on the Lancat YouTube page, so please go on and like and subscribe. That's what all the cool kids say. There's around 43 or 44 episodes, I think, in the Lancat archive on there. If you're having any audio or video issues, which in the world we live in now are some of the worst issues that you can have, I'm just going to copy and paste a link into the live chat. We do this every week, although Mr. Robbins is coming through in glorious Technicolor and the sound is tremendous. So hopefully everything's going to be okay. We'll bow to the gods of the internet and hope that they shine on us. I think that's everything in terms of housekeeping. So let's go back down south to Mr. Robbins and find out, how are you doing, Mr.?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Obviously, I'm a new dad. I'm a newish dad.
When was it?
So yeah, a little Jasper was born on September the 4th last year. Thankfully, sort of in that dip between the two sort of lockdowns where the hospital was reasonably open and it wasn't ridiculously bad, although it was quite restrictive. But yeah, so he's been, I mean, those first few weeks are pretty brutal, but yeah, it's sort of gotten to a steady state now, and he's only waking me up once in the night, and yeah, he's doing silly raspberries and things like that. So life's good. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. How are your tiredness levels? Are you beyond the? Because I found it comes and goes in waves. So the first kind of few weeks you're running on pure adrenaline and hopes and dreams, and then you kind of get used to it, and then there's the double dip after a few months. How are you doing just now in terms of doing a working day, or is that?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I don't know how I functioned up till Christmas or got things done. Looking sort of quite colourful writing happened around then, and I think that was something to do with it. I don't know how I fitted it in. Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's good. It's good. A couple of times I've had a bad night. I feel tired, but it's funny that those first few weeks when you are, it's so you're beyond any tiredness you've ever done, and you actually don't really suddenly say, I don't feel that tired, I'm actually fine. Oh, wow, I've come through the other side. And someone asks you to do any kind of cognitive task and it just goes out the window. You realize that you really are just functioning as a human, to sort of walk, talk, feed yourself, feed the baby, and that's it. But and edit a magazine, of course.
Yeah. Well, the magazine comes secondary. Yeah. I found, so this is obviously isn't about me, but as you know, we've got a little one called Eva who is, I think, around about 16 or 17 months now, and we've got a 6-year-old called Emily too. So like lockdown's been pretty full on at times, and like the funniest or the most tired I was when God, this was before Christmas, and Emily's had 1 or 2 wee health issues, which we're hopefully on top of now. And Eva's a co-sleeper, and she just takes the piss in terms of going to sleep, frankly. And there was one day I was so tired, and I was trying to just open the door to get into the house, and I couldn't understand why I was, I couldn't get the front door open, and I was using the car keys and trying to beep the front door to come open. I thought,
That's amazing.
Steve, you need to sit down, maybe have a wee lie down. But there we go. So yeah, listen, thank you so much for coming on to HomeGames. I saw on your Twitter feed the other day that you said this was like the Marvel Universe crossover.
Yeah, I mean,
know what you.
two titans, of anime, not myself really, and the Land Cat. Obviously that's how people see us, right? Big deals. I know. It was a slightly glib and facetious comment for which I'll probably get into trouble. But I was right about the tight clothing, because this is my work shirt I haven't worn for a while. So.
Yeah, this Samaritans t-shirt, I think it's shrinking in the wash. I think that's definitely what's happening. It's nothing to do with me. But yeah, no, listen, thanks very much for coming on. And the origin of this, because it's a really interesting thing. Now, I was thinking about this earlier on today, with getting you on, and most of us in the financial services industry that we work in our silos. We either work in the product side or the manufacturing side or asset management or advice, and very rarely do the two meet in terms of having real meaningful experience on both sides of things. Of course, there's loads of examples that people will be able to throw at me, but most of us, we go about we're daily routine and daily job, and then get on with it. And we've wanted to have a customer of financial advice and financial planning on the HomeGames show for a while, because we do all these mini series. We've spoken to something like 10 or 15 financial planners. We've got a CEO series on just now, where we've had Dave Ferguson and Bill Vasiliev and people like that on, and various other people from around the sector, but we've never had a customer of financial planning on, and that all changes today. So I guess I'll share just a little bit about the origin of this. I saw a remarkable article that you wrote just before Christmas. It was easily one of the best things I'd read in the sector for a long time, because you know what it's like. It's content these days, whether it's social media or marketing material or trade publications. So it's very rare that one piece totally captivates you and you think, God, I'm going to read that and I'm going to read it again. And that's what happened with the piece that you shared. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to hand over to you to tell as much or as little about this story, because it does involve your wee boy Jasper that you were talking about there. So over to you, Will.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Steve. That is really lovely thing for you to say. We do these personal pieces. I mean, in a way, they're kind of easy to write because it happened to you. But really, I sort of talked to my wife and I talked about my article, and she was like, "Our article?" I was like, "Oh yes." And it did go through. It went, and there was a lot of. I made sure that. God, I was worried. I made sure that she was really sort of part of it all the way through. Didn't give her the byline. She wasn't on the system wide, but sorry, no. But that was really important. And obviously there were things that we couldn't put in. Don't pretend that it's absolutely everything. But look, I wanted. I sort of. It was a great position to be in a way, and I'd kind of promised myself. I was very nervous about. Would we get to the term, with the pregnancy? Would everything be all right in the birth? Would Jasper be okay? And it seems maybe a bit trite, but in my head, like one of the things would be like, we'll get to the after when there's also dust has settled. I must share what's happened. But yeah, as you say, unique experience in the sense of not being a financial planning client. There are plenty of those, but obviously the editor of a financial planning magazine and a financial planning client, and then obviously to have this sort of. It applied to such a sort of specific thing as well, rather than just the long-term important long-term planning that we did. But I set out in the article the sort of 3 things I wanted to do, sort of because there was a journalistic reason behind it as well as just sort of sharing, which was that I wanted to share. I wanted to inform people, enlighten people about the IVF funding lottery that exists. Not and the cost, sort of the high cost of IVF, and the emotional cost of that can have on people, and how difficult it can be to have that funded by the NHS, or how little is funded by the NHS. And that's an interesting thing to talk about, to share my experience and to share my experiences of financial planning. That, you know, those were sort of two sort of, I think I said three things, but those are the two things I remember. And those are the things, you know, I guess sort of to sort of show how financial planning was brought to bear on that, and then also to share our own personal experiences and of that, as you know. So that was the point. So not to be lost in that was there was about IVF as well, and what happens there.
So for those of you on the chat who haven't maybe heard about this or read the article, so yourself, it's okay, it's absolutely fine. We're both reasonably new dads, so but we've got a fully functioning, coherent brain between us, so we'll get there. It's absolutely fine. You yourself and your wife approached a financial planner, or so you tell the story, mate. So you needed to go through IVF.
That's not where I should have begun. Yeah. So yeah, look, I was financial planners were referred to me by Adam Carolan from Next Gen Planners, and it was after I'd made some sort of glib remark on a message board, and he sort of sent me a message along the lines of, "You need some financial planning, mate." And I said, you know, I'll sort that out for you. Are you serious? Yes. And eventually he set me up with Joe Little and Alfie Mullen from ELA, sort of AR of Emery Little, and I was okay, and you know, they were up for it. They wanted to meet me, and I wanted to meet them, and we met, and you know, established ground rules like, okay, this isn't some sort of freebie. This isn't something that I'm doing for an article. Really, actually, at the time, I actually want some advice, and it seems like you people would actually be right for me. And we started dabbling a little bit in the process, some of those initial questions, because they're both life planners. They're both kinder trained life planners. I know Joe is, I think Alfie is as well. And that sort of straight away I thought, oh, this is wrong. Like, this is crazy. This is what I sort of read about. You can't just have one guy in here. So I had to get Katie on board. I think I said you know, she'd been aware of what I did from a respectful distance over the years, but I'm not going to lie and say that she's been pouring through each copy of NMA as it's come through the door. You know, so, you know, but so she had to be sort of convinced. She got open-minded, but you know, it wasn't like she was sold on it or had a bias towards financial planning at all. But we went and had a meeting, and she was up for it, and she liked them and gelled with them, and we started the process. And it was going to and we started life planning process basically. And it was sort of as part of that, obviously we said, oh yeah, you know, what are you know, going through these questions, what would you do, you know, with all the money in the world, what would you do with so much time to live? And of course, what came up in that was, well, we want a kid. You know, we had a lot of these things, like we want to see more of our family, we want to see more of our friends, we want to do this and that. But really it was like, well, yeah, but we want a kid. And it was really kind of like a sort of giant star in a way, and it sort of had its gravitational pull sort of pulled everything towards that. So you couldn't write the life plan without really dealing with that. Obviously, you know, well, having problems having one. And so IVF came into it, and okay, well, what do you think, you know, is that going to cost you? Yeah, it might cost us some money. We were, you know, depending where we are, and we're going to move house, maybe that'll take us into a different area where the funding's different. And it was only after sort of, I think we went on holiday and came back, and after over a few weeks that sort of radically changed, as it looked like we were going to have to pay for this ourselves, and it was going to be quite considerable. And there was all the stuff we just talked about, which was the debts we'd got and we needed to pay off, and the other things that we wanted to fund in life, and the mortgage and the buy-to-let that we'd got. And it was like, okay, wow, like we need to help you with this IVF issue, which is like, could be short-term, could be medium-term, could be long-term, could be never, but you need money. You're going to have to spend money on it regardless of the outcome. But also, and this is really important, we're gonna make sure you can live a life as well. So that was excellent. We're gonna make sure you guys can get on with your life and deal with this other thing and not have to sacrifice the two. And out of that pause, I mean, I wrote this article. So in the article I wrote that I referred to, called Funding Fertility. You can find it on New Model Advisor. I talk about this, but all the detail there's a whole load of detail that's spilt out from that. A lot of planning detail that we can talk about, but to do with, you know, saving and spending, and to do with a couple's emotional relationship to money and relationship with each other, and the role that money plays, or the kind of challenge that money presents, but you know, in that, and the barriers it puts between you, and the things that you say. So a load of stuff came out of that, and it was just about how. So what I wrote about in the article was how that year they got us to in a position to fund IVF, and also this really interesting sort of meat around that, which was how we got on with our lives in the meantime and kept our sanity, which was just crucial.
Yeah, and listen, it's really interesting, Will, and I'm sure a very friendly Lancat will post a link to that article in the chat at some point in the next half an hour or so, and I would highly recommend that you check it out, because it's just one of those articles. It's just totally different because it's deeply personal and it's real, and all those kind of things. I'm interested in talking to you a little bit more. Oh, there's Laura. Good old Laura's beating all the Lancats to it. Thank you very much for that, Laura. Thank you. It's an absolute star. I'm interested in poking a little bit more into the process. So I think certainly what we observe within the sector when we are doing our research, when the Lancat's doing our advice professional research and all those kind of things, is let's hopelessly kind of simplify the advice profession in a sentence, right? It's obviously hugely complex, but there has been this transition from product sale to, you know, consultative behavioral life coaching, life planning environment. To what extent did the process that you went through surprise you, or was it what you expected, or how did it compare to any preconceptions that you had of what advice looked like? Because it's all very well read, you know, you go to these seminars and you hear the talks and you think that sounds great, but actually experiencing it is a different thing. So what did the process look like?
That's a really, really interesting question, because there's certain biases in this that I think Adam had quite carefully picked who was going to advise me. But, you know, to sort of start at the end, so to speak, we didn't actually invest any money. Like we didn't open a single product apart from some new bank accounts, actually, some more Monzo stuff. But yeah, we didn't sort of open a product or anything like that. We didn't invest any money. I didn't have any money to invest. I've got the money that's in my pension, and everything else was going on mortgage and saving for this thing, you know. So that's one thing to bear in mind. So what happened in the end, and I'm sure Alfie and Joe would have been keen to do that, but they didn't push that at all. It wasn't really on their agenda, nor was, you know, at that point setting up even an ISA or anything like that, because it was just so obvious that it had this other thing to fund. And I don't know to what extent that's highly unusual, but that's just the way it was with us. So what I ended up paying for, I'll say I paid £200 a month for this, and that can be debated. But just to explain, you know, that was so much more attractive to me than a massive upfront fee, or massive, but like say it evens out on sort of between 1,500 or above, you know, 2K a year for a lot of advisors. You know, that initial advice piece. Well, I wasn't going to be able to afford that. I want to pay that up front, but I would pay for £200 a month, and then it's amortized over the year and it was locked in. And I don't know, given that we didn't invest, was that expensive? Maybe, but the point was that getting us started on the road, getting that whole lot of time spent up front, the huge amount of time spent up front, all those conversations up front sorting us out, that was paid for. I knew that I could have, that was paid for. So I may have ended up paying a premium in the end, but at the time it was a great discount. So just something to bear in mind, you come back to. But to answer your question, you know, in terms of surprise me, yeah, I mean, I suppose that I know a lot about life planning and things like that. I think it might have surprised other people. I think, to better answer your question, it did surprise Katie. I think that was she didn't know what to expect. She thinks all financial planners do this now. I don't. They don't. But yeah, I don't think that experience. She didn't expect that and that level. Because it was real. It was the real life planning stuff. I mean, one part of the process was that Katie and I wrote down sort of our aims and goals, things we really wanted, and those we didn't consult, and those were read back to us by respective planners. So I think Joe read back Katie's to me, and Alfie read back mine to Katie. And that's the bit where there are the tears, right, and the emotion. That is if you can learn to do that, it's not just about making people emotional and cry, but it was like I revealed things to Katie and Katie to me that we didn't really know about each other in terms of what we valued, and to ourselves as well from going through that process. So you'd say something and she'd be like, I didn't realize you thought that, and you're kind of thinking, I didn't really realize I thought that either. So that was I think probably a surprising part of the process for her and for me, and I suppose surprising that we didn't end up investing any money, although hopefully in a position to start doing a bit more of that soon.
And is there, in terms of the actual planning process, so going beyond the real kind of emotional and psychological stuff that you're doing up front to find out your goals and aspirations, what did the kind of nuts and bolts of the pounds and pence look like? Because we're, again, this, as you've acknowledged, Will, this goes against the norm. And again, here's Steve massively simplifying the advice profession, but most people arrive at an advisor with a sum of money, whether that's consolidated pension pots or an inheritance or what have you. And then typically it's the planning process is centered around how much money do you need to then glide off into retirement and into the sunset, and how do we mitigate against that, and how do we mitigate against volatility and all those kind of things. But how did and obviously Voyant and Truth and Cash Calc are deployed to visualize that and to bring it to life. What did it look like for you guys? What were the tools that the planners used to try and bring that to life, particularly for your wife, I guess, who said that she found maybe had no experience of the financial services sector?
It was budgeting rooted in a life plan, right? In the life planning process. So, and that's, this apply, and I'm sure this must apply to my quite unusual circumstance as much as it does to the more common circumstance, which is whenever it seemed tempting to go off track, to not put in the savings that we wanted to not cut the costs that we wanted to do, that needed to do, or we'd agreed to do. And those sort of decisions came up pretty quickly, right? And not even just a year that we're talking about, let alone the bigger time spans that you normally deal with. Having the fact that we'd agreed all this as in the conversation with Joe and Alfie, and agreed the plan, and that these were values that we really strongly held, was crucial to getting us to stick to those savings, spending, cost-cutting goals. That was absolutely crucial. And so, because especially when you're asking someone to put away a bit more or spend a bit less, anything like that, and it might, I don't know, you might even come to panicking about markets or something like that, or whatever. It's that it kept us honest. It would be this is what we said. We could literally say, hang on, what are we doing? This isn't what we said. Or even, what would Joe and Alfie say? And it was just, if that process had not been as good as it was, you could go, you would have kind of dismissed it and go, oh, we'll get our advice. Well, I read something somewhere else, or we'll do this instead. But it really rooted us to that. So that was important. In terms of nuts and bolts, then it was the budget, where it was essentially, how much do you need to save a month for? How much is IVF going to cost? How much do you need to put aside for that? What else are your outgoings? You need to cover the mortgage. What else do you need to? And there were other things as well. Like we wanted to. Bought a house that needed doing up. So, how much is that going to cost? What do you need to put? So there's a savings bucket for that. And then, that was food, going out, having, living life, some other expenses that we needed, furniture, things that you would call, what do you call, like a return on life? So if you're investing in a bit of DIY equipment or something, or a new shed, that's return on life, because that's decluttering your house and making it nicer. So that was another concept was employed. And then, so yeah, IVF, and that's how it was. So things went into different buckets. I think we had 2 Monzo cards each that were going to be for discretionary spending. That evolved into also having a third joint account for food shopping, which was discretionary, even though you have to buy the food because it varies so much. There's a joint savings account. A loan was taken out to cover other debts, that was established, and then I think sort of some money went towards paying off a credit card, and yeah, so that was the setup. But the IVF costs, as I mentioned, mortgage and things like that, and then the IVF cost, the IVF is going to be £5,000 for us where we are in Croydon for a cycle of IVF, and if that doesn't work, which it didn't, it's another £5,000. There are some ways, if you're lucky, you can cut that cost. So if you've got lots of eggs that are harvested, that's because we can freeze those and use those next time, so you don't have to pay as much. But the quirk of where we were was that was sort of part of the problem. So that what couldn't happen. So we started again. So obviously that was 10 grand or just over 10 grand by the end of it that we knew we needed to fund, or at least be able to fund a 5k pot in a rolling basis, which for a humble editor and a charity worker, I don't know how you guys, but for a humble editor and a charity worker with a few credit cards and mortgage to pay it's quite a big deal.
Yeah, and what did the ongoing engagement look like with your planners then? How often did they check in with you, or you report back to you, or how did that work then? How did they make sure things were on track?
Okay, I'll just mention something that I spotted in the comments, even though I shouldn't be looking at that. But
okay.
someone mentioned, but also to sort of make sure I cover this off for Joe and Alfie, someone mentioned protection. Previously, with the mortgage advisor, a lot of these things had been set up. So protection is really important, and that had been sorted out with another business. I wouldn't say sorted out, just renewed. But yeah, so it wasn't something that they needed to worry about straight away. But yeah, obviously really important that had already been taken care of. But sorry, now I've forgotten what your question was.
What did the ongoing engagement look like? How often did they check in with you? What was the process of checking in?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, it was. I mean, I think that's the thing. So as I said, it was 200 quid a month, and so they were very proactive to make sure that was worthwhile. I've written, because I'm an editor as well as a customer, so I kind of, you don't see these things in a pure form. I'd written about this kind of mode of charging already, and one of the I think Michael Kitces champions it in the US. It's probably where Joe and Alfie got the idea from, because their business is really for young entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs, not me. But the idea is, that it keeps you honest in a way that you have to kind of make sure you're keeping adding value. And of course, that was bound to happen because there was still a lot of things that we were calling them a lot. I mean, it was monthly really to say, this has come up, and just various of things that we need to spend money on, and there'd be a lot of, but it would be a lot of, there's a lot of email communication, a lot of back and forth with Alfie sort of took us under his wing really, and there'd be a lot of we'd ask him this and that, and we'd there'd be a lot of sort of to and fro, and then there'd be sort of more like monthly, okay, where are you guys, how are you getting on, there'd be a Zoom call that was kind of quite newfangled in those days in 2019 where I was, but there'd be a call where we'd have a chat. We had a few of those, so yeah, to answer your question, probably like monthly or less than that, sort of video calls to where we had where there was a really sticky issue that we needed to talk through with Alfie. A couple of times we met him in his sort of rented off, these office workspaces that don't exist anymore, to sort of have a bit more of a conflab about things that we wanted to spend, and he'd go take us through the kind of important versus urgent, and where we were, and okay, are you far enough along with your paying off the debts and savings to justify it, and take us through all those sorts of things. So there'd be like a few conflabs like that, but then a few more kind of casual emails that were going back and forth to sort of just update him. It wasn't weekly, but yeah, that sort of was how it was. So there was a fair amount of contact, but I think sort of efficiently done from Alfie's point of view, in that you didn't have to sort of you can either do it via video call, or you only had to see us in the office a couple of times, and then a lot of the other stuff could be done from email. But yeah, I'd send him emails saying, "Oh, Alfie, we've done this, this, and the other," and I'd get a pat on the back. So, yeah.
It's behavioural nudging. We had a question from Matthew asking how much the financial planning cost, but a fellow viewer, Dylan, thank you very much for that, as said it was 200 quid a month, which I believe was what you said, Will. I guess there's I don't quite know how to articulate this, but there's, of the 100 or so people who are tuning in today, a big chunk of them are financial advisors or financial planners. And I guess many of them will be looking at this going, well, how can we offer a sustainable, profitable model for people like Will? And how many people like Will are there? Obviously, you're unique and special in your own way, Will, but how many Wills are there out there who'd be willing to pay for financial planning? And I guess there's all kinds of sub-dynamics in there around the advice gap and how to bridge the advice gap and all those kind of things. Has it made you reconsider kind of the wider, this is a big question that two tired guys aren't going to answer on a Wednesday afternoon, but has it made you consider wider themes like that within the sector around how to change how we deliver planning to the wider demographics and stuff like that?
Yes. So I certainly think, the idea of, let's say this was a particular, the IVF issue came up subsequent to us sort of going to get planning. So obviously the best way to get people into seeing planners is to refer them. Like it's just still very much the best tool to get a barman on a seat is through referrals. So, we've had speakers at our events ask this question, digital entrepreneurs and things like that. Any way that can be improved through digital means or some sophisticated manner to sort of make that a more efficient process, a more scalable process, is going to be really important. Whether that's through, I'll get on to answer your question, but to any way that you can do that, any way you can kind of capture that referral through different ways, whether it's through content networks, whatever, is I think really important. Like it was still, at the end of the day, it was still the fact that I trusted Adam.
Yeah.
I'd never met Alfie and Joe, but I trusted him, so I would basically go and see whoever he suggested. Well, that is the bottom root thing. So that's really, really important. So that you scale up where anyone can come to market with some sort of referral business tool, something like that, some innovation there to get that done on a more industrial scale would be good. But yeah, in terms of planning, look, absolutely. Look, it just shows that there are just loads of these things that happen to people that you could amass, they're improved by planning. Whether it's because they have, because the life events that intersect with the plan. So, the planning helps because it helps you deal with something bad that's happened to you, or helps you achieve something. Both of those things, the planning helps. So it may be that it wasn't necessarily about the end point of a lifelong plan. It was the fact that something could happen to me, I could get ill, but the fact that I've got a plan or I've got planners and relationship with planners could help me get through that. I think there's loads of things like that, and I think there's loads of life events that happen. The death of loved ones. I mean, my dad died in 2016. I didn't have a relationship with a financial planner at the time. That would have been really, really useful right then. Also, we got married the year before. Again, that was not done with no planning. There's a lot of life events, things that you want to do, things that happen to you, and it starts when you're 30. It seems to me, all starts to unravel when you're 30, and it's about.
It doesn't get any easier, mate.
Yeah, and I've record of 36 now. But if the industry could find, the profession could find some way of showing how the relationship with a planner or relationship with a plan, and have planning going on in your life, helps you deal with things better, get better outcomes for yourself and your family, the things that you don't expect, things that you do expect, help you, in the IVF, help you deal with things that are difficult, help you manage the financial and emotional impact of things that you are already doing, that you don't need a plan to tell you that you're going to do. That was the big piece for me, really. and how you can how to work out how people relate to planners and planning more than just this conception of a linear financial plan that and its entire value is getting from A to B.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that was really well articulated. Thanks for that, Will. There's a really nice comment from Kirsty about financial planners worth their weight in goals, especially having to be mindful of the stresses also associated with life events such as IVF and death. Absolutely spot on. Kirsty, just we're still got a wee while left, but just rounding off this part of the chat, Will, your story has a happy ending, which we touched on at the start with young Jasper. But for lots of couples, they don't get that happy ending. You mentioned in the article and also at the start about the IVF lottery. Is there anything you want to say on that or to highlight while we're on?
Yeah, one of the things that came out from this was a lot of people messaging me or commenting publicly that they or their partner had sort of been through this similar, had sort of suffered the trials of fertility treatment or struggles with fertility. It affects a massive number of people. Before I wrote the article, before lockdown, I'd end up talking to male colleagues and contacts who it would come out of the woodwork after a couple of beers that they were undergoing fertility treatment or their partner was, and it was, and it was really stressful for them and they didn't talk about it. I'm not here to say to do the whole thing about guys talking about it or women talking about it. It's extremely personal. It's extremely difficult. I say there's no guaranteed outcome, which makes it, there's a few things, we talk about a lot in sort of financial planning, the idea of trying to save for something or working towards something. We like to say that you work hard enough. Hey, if you work hard enough, you can save all you like and it might not happen. All right, so that's a big deal. But one of the sort of financial consequences of this is that there's no limit to what people will do to achieve that. So people will spend vast amounts of money. They will travel abroad. And it's not just about standard fertility treatment that you get from the NHS or private hospitals. I think there's an article that I read in the newspaper a short while ago about people getting sperm donors and sort of off the books sperm donation. Crazy things people do, normal people will do because they're that desperate. But again, for that comes at a financial cost. And the NHS, I think the National Institute of Clinical Excellence guidelines are, I'm going to get this all wrong, look it up, read my article, but it's something like three free cycles for women under a certain age, maybe it's 35, at least one for women over 35. It's a relatively generous, it's making sure they get something for free. They're not every authority has to provide this though. So depending where you go, you could be, depending where you go and your age, you could be getting 3 free cycles or none. And where we were, we got none. So that's first thing. So you could start off with a position of having to pay for it from day one. But then, of course, as I mentioned, depending on how lucky you are with like egg counts and things like that, you could save a bit of money as you go forward. But really, if it's taking round after round after round, you're probably going to end up in a position where you're spending money anyway. But also, if you're not satisfied with the way, if you're getting it from the NHS and you're not satisfied with their processes, the time it's taking them to do things, the expertise of the doctors or anything like that, then you want to go private anyway. I know people who've gone up the levels of private clinics because they want to get better and better and better. If they've got the money, they'll spend it. I've spoken to financial planners who've gone through fertility treatment and spent, this is some of the quite high-end business I'm thinking of, a particular individual, but they'd spent huge amounts on a service where they were getting daily visits and someone to help with the injections daily and a lot of hands-on just to try and get this thing to work. And that was running into thousands of pounds, huge amounts of money. We ended up, so it could be something. The stats are like a few people, most people spend roughly like £5,000-10,000, some 30,000, but a few are like hundreds of thousands of pounds. But even 30,000, it's a huge amount of money. But some of them is hundreds of thousands of pounds going abroad and things like that. And so I think there is some. So where are we? There's the private clinics are what they are, and that's their business. And we used a private clinic. I think Croydon partnered with the women's clinic in Harley Street. And that was one of the advantages where we were, that it wasn't done all in-house NHS, so to speak. You'd get the drugs administered and that bit and the egg collection in hospital, and then I'd get in a taxi and then a train and another taxi with a box of eggs to this clinic in Harley Street, where then they'd give me a cup and a little softly lit room, and I'd have to do the business. But those were really expert clinicians that would have been too expensive for me to access had I gone private. So that hybrid model was quite good, and thankfully we got it done in 2 rounds. But there is campaigning. There's the Fertility Network, who I spoke to, are campaigning about this. Matt Hancock has actually spoken about this, the health minister. Obviously when he wasn't so busy with the pandemic, but he has sort of said things, occasionally popped up and said things or answered questions about it, and talks about he didn't like the funding lottery, and he said he didn't like the way it worked, and that the decision making shouldn't be in the hands of these local agencies. And so I obviously have an interest in this, and I happen to kind of agree. It's a bit of political. Do you even agree with IVF? I think back in the old days, people didn't even really agree with it. But it's just not a given at all. And I think so maybe there's still campaigning to be done there. And there's things, if you're going through this, there's a lot of, go to the Fertility Network. They've got a lot of information on their campaigns and their guidance on this. But yeah, that would be very helpful. And I think maybe would we have not bought a house in that area had we known? I don't know, but had we kind of been a bit more clued up and looked at these resources ahead of time, I think perhaps we would have got the money put aside, and thought about that earlier. That would have I wouldn't have needed to go through this whole thing.
Yeah. Listen, Will, this has been a brilliant chat, and thank you for being so candid and sharing your experience. We're just edging and inching close to the end of our time, and I just wanted to ask you another thing. Whenever I do the home games, I'll get in touch with various people and ask them to maybe suggest a few questions, and I've got in touch with a few people who know you, thinking I might find out something quite interesting or quite funny to ask you. But every single person is asked about gardening. Why the hell is everybody so keen to hear about you and gardening?
This is because of Next Gen Planners, and because of NMA's work supporting Next Gen Planners commute Zoom show over the lockdown 1 and 2 and 3. And I as part of that, I said I'd do a segment, because there are various little things that people would do, and Gretchen Betts would do from Magenta, would do a brilliant piece on arts and crafts sometimes, and people would do things on mental health and savings and things. And I said I'd do one on gardening, because I'd been doing these Twitter videos from my garden, which everyone was very interested in, because the grass was too long and the fence was too untidy, and these, anyway. So I said I'd do one on gardening, and I've been interested in gardening for to promote bees, urban bees and things like that, and birds, and make sure there's wildlife in the garden. And so I presented this documentary presentation. A 30-minute presentation called "Birds, Bees, and Bushes" by William Robbins, a documentary about my garden. And they went down a storm, and I think it was born the hashtag "Get into Figs," which was one of the many idiosyncratic phrases I employed during that rambling 20 minutes. And some sort of taster of today as well.
Here's Gary.
I can share the video. I'll share the video on my Twitter for people who want to catch up to that glorious episode.
That was Gary Hale saying it's all about the figs. He clearly remembers. And last final question to Pam, our very own Pamela Morris. Hey Pam, what's your favourite spring flower, Will?
I don't know. I think the daffodil is coming out, and I do like it. My son likes putting the flower out, and it makes an appearance in one of his favourite books, splish splash ducky. So I'm going to say the daffodil.
Great. And on the humble Daffy, we will end our chat today. Thank you again, Will. You've been an absolute superstar. Loads of people have stayed on till the very end, and loads of people saying they're going to catch up when they can. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. Next week, we're going to have Mitesh Chef, from the CEO of Reddington, who's going to come on and talk about what it is they do. And that's got a bit of an ESG bent, so it's going to be a double Nelson episode. I'm going to be on next week talking to him about all things ESG as well. Last thing to say is obviously happy birthday to HomeGames. Happy birthday, HomeGames. We will see you. Maybe we'll be here this time next year. Maybe we'll be back to normal by then. But we've got a full agenda for the next couple of months. So please do come and join us. And maybe we should end this episode of HomeGames by singing "Happy Birthday." What do you think? After 3, 1.